Ebony sank to her knees in the small hallway, her breath coming out in shaky gasps. The bright ceiling light flickered, casting twisted shadows on the walls. She could taste blood on her lip, yet she did not dare lift a hand to wipe it away. Her eyes darted left and right, searching for some way out, but the door was locked, and she heard Jordan's footsteps echo along the cracked tile floor. He shouted cruel words, calling her weak, calling her worthless, and cursing her for not obeying him. Ebony's heart pounded so loudly she thought it might burst out of her chest. She felt a chill snake down her spine. The smell of cheap beer and stale cigarette smoke filled her lungs until she felt like gagging. Jordan's voice grew closer, and she squeezed her eyes shut, wanting to vanish, wanting to escape. This was not the first time. She could not remember the exact day or hour when Jordan's abuse began, but it had become more real with every passing moment. He had once been charming enough to make her smile, though he always saw her as less important. She was a black woman someone Jordan believed was there only for his convenience. He had mocked her skin color, said horrible things about her hair, and made jokes about her family background. At first, Ebony tried to pretend it was just a twisted sense of humor, but slowly she realized the insults were not jokes at all. They were weapons. Now, she felt trapped in the house they shared, with no power to fight back. He had convinced her that nobody else would want her. She was only good for him, he often said, and she should be thankful he gave her any attention at all. The entire night flashed before her eyes, from his harsh words in the car to his final shove that sent her crashing into the wall. She still felt the sting of the impact in her shoulder. The hallway's single window was out of reach. She was cornered. Jordan's footsteps halted. He stood just a few steps away, glaring at her as though she were garbage. He leaned in, spit a curse, and repeated that she was nothing. Ebony felt a sob catch in her throat as the reality of the moment sank in. Jordan believed she was too beaten down, too scared, too powerless to ever leave him. She hugged her arms around her trembling body, heart pounding with fear. She prayed for strength, or perhaps a miracle, because she wanted out of this darkness. It was the most terrifying moment of her life so far, and a part of her mind whispered that it was only going to get worse. She swallowed hard, tasting salt and blood, wondering how long she had before the next blow came. But somehow, in that panic, she also felt something else, a flicker of rebellion. Ebony had always considered herself a gentle soul. Born and raised in a quiet neighborhood, she had spent much of her childhood reading books, watching clouds pass in the sky, and dreaming about a bright future. She wanted to be a lawyer one day, or maybe run her own business. She loved her mother's sweet smile and her father's encouraging words. They believed in her potential, never letting her doubt that she could go to college and make something of herself. Money was short, and Ebony had to watch her parents struggle to pay for the basics. Sometimes it felt like they were walking on a tightrope, and her education became a luxury they prayed they could afford. Still, Ebony did not let those struggles kill her dreams. She studied hard. She joined free school programs and volunteered at community centers. She told herself that if she worked hard enough, no barrier could stop her. That spark of hope burned inside her through the toughest of days. Over time, Ebony grew to be a kind, open-hearted young woman, always quick to smile or lend a hand to those who needed it. She believed that even in a world full of challenges, love and understanding could pave a path to happiness. Her gentle nature, however, sometimes left her too eager to see only the good in others. When Ebony first met Jordan, she was struck by what she thought was his confidence. He seemed assured, walking around like he owned every space he entered. He introduced himself in a cocky but charming manner, calling her Eb in a teasing tone that made her blush. She was only 19 at the time, and though she had big plans, she still felt uncertain about boys, relationships, and how quickly life could change. Jordan was a few years older and acted like he knew everything. He would show off, talk big about his plans, and drop hints that he came from a better background. At first, Ebony felt a thrill. She thought maybe he could teach her things about life, or push her to aim for bigger dreams. But as time passed, Ebony noticed little comments he made. He poked fun at her hair texture. He smirked about her skin color, though he tried to disguise it as a joke. She felt a sting in her heart, but she did not want to believe that he was truly being cruel. She worried that she was too sensitive, so she kept silent. Her friends noticed how Jordan acted, and a few tried to warn her. One friend even pulled her aside and said, "Ebony, I don't like the way he looks at you. It's not love or respect." But Ebony, in her youthful optimism, thought she could change him. She convinced herself that if she just loved him enough, he would see her true worth. Over the following months, Ebony found herself losing touch with her friends. Jordan liked to keep her close. He did not want her going out alone. He always made excuses for why she should not spend time with certain people. He called them bad influences or said they were jealous of her. Ebony's social circle shrank, and soon, her life began to revolve around Jordan. She noticed he would become moody if she spent too long on the phone with her mother. He would become angry if she talked to another man, even if it was just for harmless reasons like asking for directions on campus. One particular day, Ebony's close friend from high school, Tiffany, visited her unexpectedly. Tiffany was alarmed to see how thin Ebony had become, how the sparkle in her eyes had faded. She tried to take Ebony out for coffee to catch up, but Jordan demanded to come along. During the conversation, he made pointed remarks about Ebony's background, joking that Ebony would be nothing without him. Tiffany felt the hostility and could not stand it. She tried to defend Ebony, but Ebony herself felt frozen, too afraid to challenge Jordan in public. After that encounter, Tiffany tried calling Ebony many times, but Ebony rarely picked up. Gradually, Tiffany gave up, and Ebony sank deeper into isolation. In private, Jordan's bullying got worse. He ridiculed her looks, saying she did not dress nice enough or that her style was trashy. He insulted her culture, mocking her family traditions, and belittled any dream she mentioned. When Ebony tried to reason with him, he laughed in her face. "Why are you talking about going to law school?" he would say, rolling his eyes. "You're not smart enough for that. You'll only embarrass yourself." These words cut deep, but Ebony's fear of leaving him grew stronger as well. She did not have much money. She was still dependent on her parents for some help, and she worried that if she left Jordan, she would be alone with nowhere to stay. She also believed that, deep down, maybe he did care for her. Sometimes he would buy her a small gift or say sorry after a big fight. She thought maybe that showed that he truly loved her in his own way. Yet the cycle of emotional harm continued. A few times, it turned physical. He pushed her hard enough to bruise her arms. He slammed doors in her face, blocked her from leaving a room, and threw objects across the kitchen when he was in a rage. Ebony felt the tension building. Her heart started racing whenever she heard his key in the lock, not knowing if he would be in a decent mood or if he would be ready for another argument. Each day, Ebony lost a piece of herself, her confidence seeping away like water through a cracked cup. One night, after a particularly ugly fight, Ebony found herself curled up on the couch, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. Jordan was out partying with friends, and Ebony felt relief that he was gone, but also deep despair. She whispered to herself, "What am I doing? Why am I still here?" The night stretched on, with Ebony gazing at the flickering TV screen, not even taking in the images. She was lost in her thoughts, recalling her childhood dreams, her parents' warm support, and her own promise to do something great with her life. She felt like a failure for ending up in this situation, for letting Jordan treat her like dirt. Sleep did not come easy. By dawn, Ebony made a silent vow that somehow, someway, she began looking at job listings online, searching for anything that would pay her enough to save some money. Even if it was a small job, Ebony needed some control over her own life. She prayed for a chance to stand on her own feet. In the meantime, she tried to keep a low profile with Jordan, agreeing with whatever he said and doing her best to avoid triggering his temper. It was not easy. Jordan knew how to find every weak spot in Ebony's heart and press on it until she cried. Every time Ebony mentioned a job, Jordan would laugh. "No one is going to hire you," he sneered. "You're not that smart, Ebony. And who would hire a black girl like you without a fancy degree?" Ebony often fell silent, the sting of his words making her chest tighten. She would look down at the floor and remind herself to stay calm. But inside, she was planning her escape, even if it was only a vague plan. Then came a day that changed everything. Ebony had been invited to a networking event through a free community program. She was hesitant to attend, fearing Jordan's reaction. But she gathered her courage and simply told him she was meeting a friend for coffee. At the event, she met a group of people who were all working on small business ideas. They were warm and inclusive, and they had different backgrounds and life stories. Ebony felt a surge of hope for the first time in ages. People listened to her ideas. They encouraged her to think big. They urged her to join more community events and keep learning. One of the organizers, a middle-aged woman named Linda, gave Ebony her card and said she would love to see Ebony again at the next meeting. As Ebony walked home that evening, she felt alive with possibility. She realized that Jordan had been lying to her all along, trying to make her believe that the rest of the world did not want her and would not value her. But here, she found a welcoming group who appreciated her thoughts and personality. She almost laughed at the thrill of it. She was still worried about Jordan's anger when he found out where she had been, but she tried to swallow that fear. This tiny taste of freedom and acceptance made her see a crack in the chains that bound her. When she arrived, Jordan was waiting. The tension in the air was so thick she felt suffocated. He demanded to know where she had been, who she had talked to, and why she had not answered his texts promptly. Ebony felt her pulse race, but she tried to keep calm. She mumbled a half-truth about meeting friends and lost track of time. His eyes narrowed, and he grabbed her by the arm, hard enough to make her wince. "Don't lie to me," he hissed. Ebony felt tears well up, but she refused to let them fall. She gave no further answers. Something about her silence enraged him. He twisted her arm and yelled more insults, demeaning her for even thinking of independence. She pulled away, hugging her arm close to her chest, feeling the bruise already forming beneath her sleeve. Later, when Jordan stomped off to the bedroom, Ebony let out a shaky breath and gently pressed the new bruise, tears sliding down her cheeks. She told herself, "Never again. I will get away from this." The days that followed were tense. Ebony went back to that community group, sneaking around Jordan's schedule. She lied about her whereabouts, always fearful he would discover her betrayal. She found something at those meetings that she had lost long ago: hope in her own abilities. People there saw her as a bright mind, someone with potential. They made her feel validated, as though all the cruelty Jordan had spewed was nothing but hot air. Around this time, Ebony also began looking for jobs more earnestly. She sent out applications, spent time polishing her simple resume, and tried to envision a future beyond Jordan. It took weeks, but her efforts paid off. She was offered a low-paying but decent administrative position at a local firm. The pay was modest, but she felt a spark of joy. She could save money, even if it was only a little at first, and maybe rent a small place for herself. The idea of stepping away from Jordan for good lit a fire inside her. She fantasized about living in peace, no longer flinching at every harsh word or flying object. However, Ebony knew she had to move carefully. Jordan's mood had grown volatile. He questioned her, rifled through her belongings, and once even checked her phone when she was in the shower. She caught him looking through her call logs. His face was twisted with anger as he demanded to know who she was contacting. Ebony invented a story about calling her aunt to discuss family matters. For the moment, that seemed to calm him, though she saw the suspicion in his eyes. She felt cornered, but she pressed on, determined to leave before it got worse. At night, Ebony dreamed of walking out the door and never looking back. She would be free to laugh, to talk to friends, to explore her interests, and to claim her identity without fear of judgment. She promised herself she would not let Jordan's hateful words about her skin or her worth define her. Over time, the quiet but strong love she had for herself started to blossom again, refusing to be smothered by Jordan's bigotry. Yet, Ebony had no illusions. She knew that once she tried to leave, Jordan would likely become more dangerous. She had read articles online about people in abusive relationships. It was often said that the moment someone tries to break free is the most perilous. But Ebony was done living as his prisoner. She was done being told that she was beneath him. She knew the risk, but she also knew staying would surely crush her spirit completely. Then one cool evening, she gathered her nerve. Jordan had gone out with his friends again. Ebony packed a small bag with a few clothes, essentials, and the cash she had saved from her new job. Her hands shook as she quietly left the apartment. She did not care if she forgot something. All that mattered was escaping the darkness. She slipped out into the night, heart pounding, and flagged a cab to a modest motel. She refused to let herself dwell on fear. This was her moment, and she did not plan to look back. Ebony stayed at the motel for several days. She turned off her phone to avoid Jordan's frantic calls, but deep down, she knew he would eventually find out where she worked. He might show up there, cause a scene, or even try to drag her back. Fear clung to her, but she pushed forward. She confided in Linda from the community program, who helped her find a small but safe apartment across town. It was barely furnished, and the walls were thin, but to Ebony, it felt like a palace of freedom. She would sit on the edge of the mattress on the floor, thinking, "I'm free. I'm finally free." For a few precious weeks, Ebony had a taste of peace. She went to work, returned to her apartment, and cooked simple meals in her tiny kitchen. She reminded herself she could handle this new life on her own. Even so, Jordan was not out of the picture. He called her at work, left threatening voicemail messages, and texted her dozens of times a day. Sometimes the messages were apologetic, promising he would change. Other times, Ebony tried to ignore them, though her hands would tremble whenever she saw his name on the phone. She also faced new challenges. Money was tight. She had to budget carefully just to make rent and buy groceries. The loneliness sometimes weighed on her, since she had cut off many of her old friends under Jordan's influence, and she was not sure how to reconnect. But when she felt discouraged, she thought of the darkest nights with Jordan. She remembered the bruises, the hateful words, the suffocating control. It fueled her determination to keep going. She would rather struggle on her own than live another day under his tyranny. One day, Ebony's firm held a joint event with a major corporation in the city. Employees were invited to attend seminars, mingle, and share their work experiences. Ebony was excited. This was an opportunity to learn and maybe even network for a better job down the road. She felt nervous about going alone, but Linda encouraged her to step out of her comfort zone. So Ebony prepared a simple outfit, put on light makeup, and went to the event. It felt like another world compared to her cramped apartment. During a break in the afternoon, Ebony found herself standing at a small refreshment table, sipping on water, when she noticed a man in an elegant suit approach. He was tall, with a calm yet commanding presence. His hair was styled neatly, and he gave her a polite nod before introducing himself as Ethan Pierce, the CEO of the hosting corporation. Ebony almost dropped her cup in surprise. She had heard that the CEO was rumored to be a young billionaire, known for being both brilliant and very private. She never expected him to mingle with the lower-level staff so casually. "I'm Ethan," he said, extending a hand. His voice was warm. He seemed genuinely interested in who she was. Ebony introduced herself, feeling a bit shy. They chatted briefly about the event, and Ethan asked her a few questions about her role at the smaller firm. He was easy to talk to, listening attentively and nodding thoughtfully at her answers. Despite his status, he did not come off as arrogant or distant. He appeared sincere, almost humble. Ebony felt a pleasant flutter in her chest at his attention, though she reminded herself he was just being polite. As the day went on, Ebony attended different workshops, taking notes and trying to soak up all the knowledge she could. She noticed Ethan around the room, sometimes speaking to groups, other times just observing. Once in a while, she caught his eye across the crowd, and he would give a small smile or nod. Ebony felt warmth flood her cheeks, but she told herself not to read too much into it. Still, it was nice to be treated as an equal, not a lesser person. She realized how much Jordan's treatment had twisted her view of what normal interaction should be. During a brief networking session, Ethan approached Ebony again. He asked her thoughts on the seminars. Ebony answered candidly, sharing that she found the sessions inspiring, and that she hoped to grow her skills and someday move up in her career. Ethan studied her face with a look of respect. "It sounds like you have clear goals," he said. "Have you ever considered further training or education to match your ambitions?" Ebony was surprised by the question. She admitted that she once had dreams of going to law school or pursuing a degree that would let her climb higher, but life had taken unexpected turns. Ethan nodded sympathetically. He told her about some scholarship programs his company sponsored and encouraged her to look them up. He even offered to pass her information on to the relevant department if she was truly interested. Ebony's heart soared with excitement and gratitude. They spoke for a few more minutes, exchanging business cards. She felt inspired to at least try for one of those scholarships, though she knew the competition would be stiff. By the time the event ended, the next few days passed in a blur. Ebony dived into her work, daydreaming about applying to the scholarship program Ethan had mentioned. On a whim, she sent Ethan a polite thank-you email, expressing her appreciation for their conversation and his willingness to share information. She did not expect a reply. He was the CEO, after all. Surely he had more pressing matters than responding to a junior employee from another firm. But to her surprise, he emailed back the next day. His tone was friendly, and he asked if she had any follow-up questions about the scholarship. Ebony blushed at her desk, feeling a small bubble of excitement. She replied, asking for more details and if she could meet with someone who could walk her through the application process. Ethan responded that he would put her in touch with the correct people and even offered to meet for coffee if she wanted more guidance. Ebony's heart pounded. She could not remember the last time someone with that level of power and influence treated her with genuine kindness. They arranged to meet one evening at a quiet coffee shop near Ebony's office. She felt both nervous and thrilled, unsure of what to expect. She worried about her appearance, recalling Jordan's cruel remarks about her looks, but she pushed those worries aside, reminding herself that she was free now. She got to the coffee shop early, dressed in her simple professional clothes, scanning the entrance for Ethan. When he arrived, he apologized for being a few minutes late, and they ordered drinks. The conversation flowed easily. He asked about her background, and Ebony, in turn, asked about his path to becoming a CEO. They laughed at small jokes. There was a comfortable warmth, a sense of mutual respect. Ebony realized how starved she had been for such normal, decent human interaction. As they continued to meet over the next weeks always in public places, always under the excuse of discussing the scholarship, Ebony felt her admiration for Ethan grow. She learned he had not come from a wealthy family. He had built his fortune through determination, smart investments, and some lucky breaks. He valued education and believed in supporting those with potential, no matter their background. He spoke passionately about community programs and showed real interest in Ebony's ideas for improving them. Ebony tried to remain professional, but she could not help the gentle flutter in her chest whenever she saw him walk in the door or heard his voice say her name. She reminded herself that she was just out of a terrible, abusive relationship. She was in no state to jump into anything romantic. And Ethan was in a different world, rich, powerful, and always surrounded by people who wanted his attention. Yet, the more time they spent, the deeper her feelings grew. She was taken by his kindness, his intelligence, and the way he treated her as an equal partner in conversation. Meanwhile, Jordan's shadow still lurked. Sometimes Ebony found threatening messages pinned to the door of her apartment. She suspected it was Jordan, though she had never caught him in the act. The words were ugly, insulting her race, calling her worthless, and warning her to come back or face consequences. Ebony filed a police report, but without direct proof, there was little they could do. She changed her phone number, hoping to sever the last thread of contact with Jordan. Her anxiety rose, but she told herself not to give in to fear. She was stronger than she had ever been before. One evening, after a long day of work and classes for the scholarship application, Ebony was walking to her apartment building when she felt a sudden grip on her arm. She turned and saw Jordan's furious eyes glaring at her in the dim streetlight. Panic flared in her chest. She tried to yank her arm free, but he tightened his hold. He spat out hateful words, accusing her of betraying him, calling her names that made her stomach turn. Ebony's mind raced. She realized with dread that the street was almost empty, and she had no immediate help. Jordan sneered that he had learned about her little fling with the fancy CEO. His face twisted with jealousy and rage. Ebony denied nothing. Instead, she forced herself to speak in a steady voice. "Let go of me," she said, "or I will scream." For a split second, Jordan's eyes flickered with doubt, but then he growled that she was weak and nobody would help her. He jerked her closer, causing pain to shoot through her shoulder. Ebony's mind screamed with terror. She was about to cry out for help when footsteps echoed from around the corner. A passing couple noticed the commotion. They shouted, asking if everything was okay. Jordan let go abruptly, cursing under his breath. He glared at Ebony with a look that promised vengeance. She backed away, rubbing her arm. The couple hurried over, concerned, but Jordan vanished into the night. Ebony thanked them with shaking words and raced up the stairs to her apartment. She locked the door, leaning against it to catch her breath. Her heart pounded like a drum, the memory of Jordan's hateful expression haunting her. She realized then that she might never be completely free of him unless she took stronger action. Despite the fear, Ebony's life did not remain at a standstill. She decided to open up to Ethan about Jordan, though she kept certain details vague out of embarrassment. She did not want to dump all her trauma on him, but she felt he deserved to know she had a troubled past that might cause problems. She told him her ex had been abusive. She did not share every ugly word or bruise, but Ethan's face grew dark with concern. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "You shouldn't have to go through that alone." He asked if she felt safe, if there was anything he could do to help. Ebony felt tears prick her eyes at his kindness. She shook her head, explaining that she had reported him to the police but needed more evidence for them to act. Ethan suggested she talk to a lawyer, or maybe consider a restraining order. Ebony admitted she felt overwhelmed, but she appreciated his support. Over the following weeks, Ethan gently offered more help. He respected Ebony's independence and did not push, but he reminded her that she had options. He even connected her with a trusted attorney who specialized in protective orders. Ebony hesitated. She did not want to stir up more conflict. But at the same time, she realized that Jordan would not stop on his own. Eventually, she took the step. With the attorney's guidance, she filed for a restraining order. The process was nerve-wracking, but she felt a measure of relief, like she was taking control of her life and refusing to be a silent victim any longer. Meanwhile, Ebony's bond with Ethan grew stronger. Though it started as professional meetings, they began to share more personal stories. They went for walks in the park after a hectic day. They tried new restaurants on weekends, sampling different cuisines. It was a slow blossoming of a relationship built on respect and understanding. Ebony found herself laughing, truly laughing, for the first time in years. She noticed that Ethan never made her feel small or inferior. He celebrated her successes, no matter how small they seemed. He was patient when she talked about her fears and aspirations. The scholarship application process was also moving along well. Ebony was determined to ace it. She spent hours perfecting her personal statement and gathering letters of recommendation from Linda and some supervisors at work. Ethan offered advice but never tried to steer her. He told her it was her journey, and he would be there to cheer her on. His calm presence helped her believe in herself again. Her confidence grew in small steps, and she no longer heard Jordan's echo in her head, telling her she was worthless. Instead, she heard Ethan's gentle encouragement and her own renewed voice of self-worth. One night, after a successful day of finalizing her application, Ebony found herself at Ethan's penthouse apartment purely by coincidence. Or so she told herself. He had invited her for a small gathering with a few work friends, but at the last minute, an emergency pulled the others away. Ebony showed up feeling anxious about being alone with him in such a grand space, but Ethan made her feel at ease. He gave her a tour of the living area, which was sleek and modern but also carried a sense of cozy warmth. The view from the floor-to-ceiling windows took her breath away. City lights sparkled across the skyline, a sea of gold and silver that reminded her how vast the world was beyond her hardships. They ended up on the balcony, sipping tea under the evening stars. The conversation turned personal, and Ebony felt her heart pound as Ethan took her hand. He looked into her eyes and confessed that he admired her strength, her intelligence, and her kind heart. Ebony's cheeks flushed, and she found herself confiding that she had never felt so respected and safe. They leaned closer, and in that moment, they shared their first gentle kiss. A surge of emotion washed over Ebony, and she realized that true, caring love was something she had never truly known with Jordan. Tears of relief slipped down her face, and Ethan brushed them away softly, pulling her into a reassuring embrace. In the weeks that followed, Ebony and Ethan moved slowly but steadily in their new relationship. Ebony insisted on keeping parts of her independence, her job, her small apartment, because it was important to her sense of self to stand on her own feet. Ethan understood, never pressuring her to move in with him or become dependent on him financially. Instead, he supported her professional growth. He introduced her to mentors, helped her build a broader network, and sometimes surprised her with thoughtful gestures, like sending her a gift basket of healthy snacks during a busy week, or dropping off coffee on mornings she had early meetings. Jordan remained a threat, at least in Ebony's mind, but the restraining order had been granted. When a furious Jordan attempted to show up at her workplace, the security guards had him removed, and he faced legal consequences for violating the order. Ebony felt both dread and satisfaction. Part of her worried he might retaliate, But another part felt empowered by the law finally acting on her behalf. She did not want to live in fear. She pressed charges where she could. She also kept in close contact with Linda and her new supportive network. Days turned into months. Ebony's application for the scholarship was approved, and she was accepted into a specialized program that would help her balance work and study, leading her toward the law degree she had once dreamed of. She felt like she was standing on the cusp of a new chapter in her life, a chapter where she was no longer a victim, but a proud, determined woman shaping her own destiny. Ethan and Ebony's relationship deepened with time. He marveled at her determination, and she admired his generosity and integrity. They laughed together often, went to charity events, and took short trips when they both had time off. People around them noticed the blossoming connection. Some of Ebony's co-workers teased her about dating the CEO, but it was done in good humor, and they seemed genuinely happy for her. Yet Ebony kept her apartment as her sanctuary. She spent some evenings alone there, studying, reflecting, and calling the family she had become distant from during her time with Jordan. She was working to rebuild those relationships. Her mother cried tears of joy when Ebony finally shared that she had left Jordan and was pursuing higher education. Her father spoke words of pride and reminded her of the strong little girl who had once believed she could conquer the world. Ebony felt her heart swell with gratitude. She was finally living the life she deserved. For a while, Jordan seemed to disappear. The restraining order and the charges had forced him to lay low. Ebony heard rumors through an old mutual acquaintance that he had been fired from his job for drunken fights and had moved to a cheaper part of the city. She told herself not to dwell on him, trying to release the anger and fear. She focused on her future and on healing the scars left by the abuse. Time flew by, and soon Ebony was immersed in her studies, working her job, and enjoying the warmth of Ethan's love. She cherished the small, sweet moments, waking up to a good luck text before an exam, cooking dinner together in her tiny kitchen, and dancing to soft music in the living room when neither wanted to say goodnight. They spoke of the future occasionally. Ethan hinted that he would love to spend his life with her, but Ebony wanted to take each day as it came. She had rushed into a relationship before and paid a high price. This time, she wanted to move with careful thought and mutual understanding. Then came the day that changed everything again. Ethan's company was hosting a grand charity gala, with big names from the business world in attendance. Ebony had been invited, both as a guest and as someone involved with one of the scholarship programs they sponsored. She wore a simple but elegant dress, feeling a mixture of pride and nerves as she accompanied Ethan into the grand ballroom. Cameras flashed, reporters asked questions, and she tried not to let the attention overwhelm her. By now, the public knew the CEO was seeing someone, and they were curious about the woman who had captured his heart. Ebony handled it with grace, smiling politely and holding Ethan's arm. She recognized a few people from past events, greeting them warmly. She had come a long way from the timid girl who let Jordan stifle her in every way. As they mingled, Ebony felt a strange tingling at the back of her neck. She brushed it off as jitters until she noticed someone standing in the corner, staring at her with burning eyes. Her heart clenched. It was Jordan. She could hardly believe he was there. How had he managed to slip in? Maybe he disguised himself as part of the staff or found an unguarded entrance. But there he was, glaring at her, a twisted smile on his face. Ebony felt her hands shake. She excused herself from a group conversation, telling Ethan she needed a moment. Ebony hurried to a quieter area near a side exit. She leaned against the wall, taking deep breaths, telling herself not to panic. She had come too far to let Jordan scare her now, but the memory of his last assault still haunted her, the way he had grabbed her arm. She scanned the area, trying to see if he had followed her. Ethan was there, likely wondering why she had rushed off. She knew the event had plenty of security, but would they recognize Jordan as a threat? Suddenly, Jordan appeared out of the shadows, stepping into the corridor. Ebony's heart hammered, but she stood tall. She could see the desperation in his eyes, the anger, the envy. "Look at you," Jordan sneered, "acting like a queen with your fancy billionaire boyfriend. You think you're better than me, don't you?" Ebony swallowed hard, but her voice did not tremble this time. "Yes," she said simply, "I do, and I'm not afraid of you anymore." Jordan's face twitched with rage. He hissed vile insults at her, mocking her race once again, telling her she would never truly belong in the CEO's world. Ebony felt a surge of anger. She remembered every degrading thing he had said and done. She had endured bruises, cuts, and scars, physical and emotional. Now she looked him straight in the eye. "You're the one who's worthless," she said quietly, refusing to stoop to his level of name-calling. "And if you try anything, there will be consequences." He lunged forward, grabbing her wrist as if to drag her away. Ebony cried out. Immediately, a pair of security guards rushed into the corridor. Behind them came Ethan, his expression twisted in shock and fury. Jordan tried to pull Ebony toward the exit, but the guards pried him off her. He yelled curses as they pinned him to the wall, calling Ebony names that made the air feel heavy. But Ebony no longer felt powerless. She clutched Ethan's hand, tears in her eyes, as Jordan was restrained. The head of security called the police. The aftermath was swift. Police arrived and arrested Jordan for violating the restraining order, trespassing, and attempted assault. He was handcuffed in front of all those important guests, a humiliating scene that Ebony could hardly believe she was witnessing. She saw the raw hatred in his eyes, but also a flicker of fear. His life was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. She watched, shaken, as they led him away. She did not feel pity, only relief that he was finally facing the law for his actions. Ethan held her close that night, gently wiping her tears. They did not return to the gala, instead driving back to Ethan's penthouse in tense silence. Once inside, Ebony let out a sob, burying her face in her hands. The shock of the confrontation hit her like a wave. He told her how proud he was of her bravery, how strong she had become. Ebony whispered that it all felt unreal, like a nightmare that just would not end. Yet, she knew deep down that her nightmare was nearing its conclusion. Jordan's arrest meant he would likely face severe charges, given his past violations. She hoped this would finally free her from his shadow. That night, Ebony stayed with Ethan. She found comfort in his arms, though her thoughts swirled with what-ifs and old memories. By dawn, she had a renewed sense of clarity. She realized that Jordan's downfall was the result of his own cruelty. He had pushed her too far, disrespected her humanity, and now he was facing the destruction he had brought upon himself. Ebony felt no guilt. She had done nothing wrong. She was simply living her life, striving for a better future. Over the next few months, Jordan's legal battles mounted. More evidence of his abusive behavior surfaced. Ebony was not the only person he had tormented in the past. Others came forward, sharing stories of his aggression and hateful behavior. The judge did not look kindly on his record. Eventually, Jordan was sentenced to prison time, sealing his fall from the life he once knew. He lost any shred of status he had, and his finances were in ruins. Ebony heard bits and pieces but did not concern herself too much with the details. She was only relieved to be free from his grip at last. Ebony's own life soared to new heights. She devoted herself to her studies, excelling in her program. She balanced her job responsibilities, her relationship with Ethan, and her personal healing. She joined a support group for survivors of domestic abuse, finding solidarity and comfort in sharing her story. She wanted to help others who felt trapped and helpless. Along the way, she experienced moments of deep sadness for what she had endured, but also a swelling pride for how far she had come. As the months passed, she and Ethan grew even closer, supporting each other through every challenge. Ethan faced pressure at work, but Ebony was there to encourage him, showing him that he did not have to carry everything on his own. He, in turn, reminded her that she was not alone in her ambitions and that he loved her fiercely for who she was. The trust they shared was like a shield against the world's hardships. At the end of Ebony's first successful semester in her law-related program, Ethan surprised her with a trip to a cozy lakeside cabin. He told her it was to celebrate her achievements, to give them both a break from the demands of work and city life. Ebony accepted eagerly, excited for a chance to relax in nature. The cabin was charming, nestled among tall pines by a crystal blue lake. The air smelled of fresh pine needles, and the water reflected the bright sky. They spent the days canoeing, roasting marshmallows by a campfire, and talking about their hopes for the future. On the final evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan led Ebony to a small dock jutting out over the lake. The sky was ablaze with pinks, oranges, and purples. In that magical twilight, Ethan took her hands and told her how much she meant to him. He spoke of the trials they had faced together, how her strength and kindness had changed him, how he wanted to stand by her side forever. Ebony's eyes grew wide as Ethan slowly went down on one knee and pulled out a small box. Her heart skipped a beat. "Ebony," he said softly, his voice trembling with emotion, "will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Ebony's cheeks. She thought back on her life, the young girl with big dreams, the battered woman who had almost lost hope, and now this strong, resilient person who found genuine love. She nodded, unable to form words at first. Then, her voice shaky and full of joy, she answered, "Yes, yes, I will." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and they embraced. The setting sun cast a golden glow across the water, as if blessing their union. News of their engagement spread quickly within both their circles. Most people were thrilled for them, while some tabloids speculated about the Cinderella story of the billionaire CEO and the driven young woman from a humble background. Ebony handled the attention with grace, focused more on her personal growth and the love she shared with Ethan than on gossip. She informed her parents, who cried tears of pride and happiness. Her mother insisted on cooking a huge celebratory meal the next time Ebony visited. Meanwhile, Ethan's family was also delighted. Though wealthy, they were grounded and supportive. His mother and father welcomed Ebony warmly, charmed by her intelligence, sincerity, and resilience. They never once looked down on her background. In fact, they admired how far she had come through determination alone. Ebony felt a sense of belonging she had never known. She sometimes worried about people judging her, but with each passing day, that fear grew smaller. She was surrounded by love and acceptance. Wedding planning began in earnest, though Ebony wanted a simple, heartfelt ceremony, not a lavish extravaganza. Ethan agreed. Their shared vision was a day filled with genuine emotions rather than opulence. They decided on an intimate gathering at a scenic garden estate owned by Ethan's family, with only close friends and relatives invited. Ebony's parents would be there, along with Linda, Tiffany, and others who had stood by Ebony's side. Invitations were sent, and everyone cheered for the union of two people who had found each other after so much pain and struggle. During the months leading up to the wedding, Ebony found herself busier than ever. She balanced wedding planning with her studies and part-time work. She and Ethan also met with philanthropic groups to discuss expansions of the scholarship programs. They wanted to do more to help people from marginalized backgrounds. Ebony felt passionately about supporting other Black women who might face limited opportunities or who had suffered abuse. She saw the charity work as part of her life's purpose, a way to give back and use her experiences to make a difference. Every day, Ebony felt grateful that she had refused to remain under Jordan's thumb. She knew that if she had stayed, her life would have been a nightmare of continued abuse. Now, she was flourishing, embodying the strong, confident person she had always hoped to be. Sometimes she got emotional thinking about it all, but she let those tears be tears of release and joy. The wedding day arrived sooner than she expected. Early in the morning, Ebony woke up in a guest suite at the estate, feeling butterflies flutter in her stomach. Tiffany and Linda helped her dress, and her mother fussed over every detail of the gown. The dress was elegant but not overly showy, a gentle silhouette that hugged Ebony's figure and flowed softly at the bottom. She looked in the mirror, hardly believing she was the same person who had once been too afraid to stand up for herself. Her father stepped in, his eyes shining with pride. "You look radiant, baby girl," he said, voice thick with emotion. Outside, Ethan was already greeting guests, his heart pounding in anticipation. He wore a tailored suit that complemented his tall frame, and he couldn't stop smiling. The garden estate was filled with fresh flowers, their scents wafting through the mild breeze. A string quartet played soft music as guests found their seats. Sunlight streamed through the leaves, creating patterns of light and shadow along the aisle where Ebony would soon walk. When Ebony stepped into view, a hush fell over the crowd. She held a simple bouquet of white roses. The music swelled, and she took one step at a time, her arm linked with her father's. She caught Ethan's eye at the altar, and they shared a tender look that spoke volumes of love, relief, and hope. Her father kissed her cheek gently before guiding her forward, then stepped aside so she could stand next to Ethan. The ceremony was led by a kind officiant who spoke words of unity, trust, and resilience. Ebony and Ethan exchanged vows they had written themselves. Ebony's voice shook with tears as she spoke of the light Ethan brought into her life, his unwavering respect, and how he made her believe in her strength again. Ethan's vow was equally moving, promising to cherish her, support her dreams, and protect her heart. The final pronouncement of husband and wife was met with joyful applause. Ethan and Ebony shared a loving kiss, sealing their vows in front of the people who mattered most. A small reception followed, filled with warm laughter, toasts, and the clinking of glasses. Family and friends danced on the lawn under a canopy of soft lights. Linda gave a heartfelt speech, recalling the day she had first met Ebony at that community program and how far Ebony had come. Tiffany apologized for drifting away during Jordan's controlling reign, but promised she would always be there for Ebony now. Ebony embraced her, tears of forgiveness in her eyes. Her parents each said a few words, praising their daughter's courage and perseverance. Even Ethan's parents joined in, calling Ebony their beloved daughter-in-law and praising her good heart. As evening settled, the newlyweds found a quiet moment under the twinkling stars. Away from the main party, they stood side by side, gazing at the moonlit sky. Ebony felt overwhelmed by gratitude for her new life. She reached for Ethan's hand, and he pulled her close, whispering, "This is just the start of our journey." Ebony smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She remembered the darkness she had overcome, but now, all she saw was a bright horizon stretching out before her. Jordan, of course, was not there. He was locked away, serving time for his actions. Some might say Ebony had destroyed his life, but in truth, she had simply walked away and refused to let him destroy hers. His downfall was a result of his own hatred and choices. Ebony did not revel in his misery, but she felt a sense of justice. She hoped he might learn something in the process, though she doubted it. Her new life was far too important. The days turned into weeks and then months. Ebony continued her studies, inching closer to finishing her program. Married life with Ethan was joyful and calm. They respected each other's space, discussed issues openly, and supported each other's endeavors. Sometimes Ebony woke up in the morning still expecting the fear of the past to grip her heart. But then she would roll over, see Ethan's peaceful face, and remember she was safe. She recalled the terrified girl on the hallway floor, cowering as Jordan's hateful words rained down on her. That girl was gone. In her place stood a determined, educated, and deeply loved woman. Soon, Ebony took on a new challenge. She began volunteering at a local women's shelter on weekends, offering guidance and moral support to those stuck in abusive relationships. She talked to them about legal options, personal safety, and the importance of self-belief. It was emotional work, sometimes draining, but she found it rewarding. Each time she helped someone find hope, she felt like she was paying forward the kindness that Linda and others had shown her. Ethan supported her wholeheartedly. He even helped fund improvements for the shelter, ensuring they had better security and resources. Together, they dreamed of expanding the program to include free legal advice clinics, counseling, and job placement services. Ebony saw her old self in the eyes of the women who came for help: the fear, the doubt, the question of whether they deserved more in life. She vowed to stand by them, to be a pillar of light, just as others had been for her. A year after their wedding, Ebony finished her program and passed all her exams. It was a triumphant moment. She secured a role in a legal firm that worked closely with nonprofits and advocacy groups, focusing on helping disadvantaged communities. She felt fulfilled, as if all the pain she had endured now fueled her passion for justice. Ethan continued to expand his empire, but he never lost sight of the community programs he had pledged to nurture. They were now a powerful couple, known not just for wealth but for using resources to uplift others. They continued to grow in their personal relationship too. Discussions arose about starting a family, about traveling the world, and about building a legacy of compassion. Ebony occasionally felt a flutter of fear at the idea of parenthood. She worried about bringing children into a world where some men treated women as Jordan had treated her. But Ethan reassured her, telling her they would raise any future children with love, respect, and the knowledge that they could become anything they dreamed of. Ebony's heart felt light whenever he spoke those words. Years later, Ebony stood at the front of a large conference room, wearing a crisp suit and addressing a crowd gathered for a charity event. This time, she was the keynote speaker, a successful attorney, a respected advocate, and a symbol of resilience. Ethan sat in the front row, pride glowing in his eyes. Linda, Tiffany, Ebony's parents, and many others who had supported her journey were there too, clapping as she took the microphone. In simple, heartfelt words, Ebony told her story. She spoke of the challenges she had faced, the abuse that nearly broke her spirit, and the moment she decided she would not remain a victim. She talked about the power of self-worth, the importance of supportive communities, and the belief that dreams can be reignited no matter how dark life becomes. She did not mention Jordan by name, but she touched on how hate, bigotry, and control can tear someone down. Then, she gave credit to the people who had lifted her up, including the love she found with Ethan. She assured the audience that every person, regardless of background, color, or past hardship, deserves to be seen, heard, and uplifted. When Ebony finished, the room erupted in applause. She stepped off the stage, and Ethan greeted her with a tight hug, whispering how proud he was. As she looked around the room at the bright faces filled with hope, she felt at peace. She had found the life she deserved, free from the shackles of cruelty, and filled instead with love, respect, and purpose. Jordan's attempts to crush her had failed, and in the end, he had destroyed only himself. Ebony's heart overflowed with gratitude for the second chance she had been given, and she whispered a silent promise to keep fighting for others who needed it, because that was who she was now, a survivor, a champion, and a woman who had turned her pain into power.